Hello, YouTube. I'm here with a special video just for you. And you're like, wait a minute. I recognize these Doki girls. I thought we finished all that. We did. But the way that I finished it with doing one video for like all the stuff we missed and like the good ending, just all that is one thing. While the right choice, I realized I don't have another variety video for you for this week. So I thought, you know, I could vamp long enough, I can talk long enough to give you something to watch. You know, yeah, we don't have any gameplay left, but there's some questions that remain unanswered, stuff we can analyze, think about, talk about, discuss, and some of you are like, I don't care about, I just want to see gameplay, you know, that's fine. You know, I'll see you tomorrow with my DVD video, I'll see you next week with my next variety stream video, but for those who are like, oh, I wanted something to, you know, watch while I was on my lunch break, I wanted something to watch while I was doing dishes, I gotcha. Specifically, you're like, okay, so what is this video actually going to be about before I get into it? We're going to continue a question that I answered earlier. Before any of the weekend stuff happened, I specifically answered, who is your favorite, before stuff went off the rails. But of course, when I answered it, I didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. So I want to go back to that and see, has anything changed? Continuing from that, there's like, well, who would you actually want to date? And you're like, well, isn't that the same thing? Not necessarily. It's like, stick around, you'll be surprised. What is this clickbait nonsense? I'm already in the video. But before I get into any of the like analyzing, talking, etc., I wanted to give credit where credit is due. You're like, okay, you see the background, it's the same one I had when I was talking about my thoughts when I first finished the game, all that stuff. Yes, but that's not going to be the only image. Spoiler alert, I have a fancy image slideshow for you all. And the images are either official Doki Doki Literature Club images, official Doki Doki Literature Club Plus image. Hey, speaking of which, there's a transition. But some of the stuff, like, wait a minute, I don't recognize that from any of the games. Because some of it isn't, but it is all official-ish. It's all Satchley work. If you recall, Satchley, she's the one who did all of the character art, all the original character art. She might have also helped with character design, but I'm not sure about that. But for sure, she did the original art. And so yeah, it's all her stuff. So, you know, thank you, Satchley, for giving us something so we're not just staring at a black screen. Okay, with all that said, let's get into the actual discussing. Okay, so the first time that we answered the question, like, who's your favorite, you know, who's your favorite, who's best girl, whatever, it was at the start of, you could, if you want to watch the whole thing again, when I analyzed all that stuff, is at the start of the 4th video. And the too long didn't read version of that is, I said Sayori with a soft spot for Yuri. Now, how has that changed? Now that I have all the pieces to the puzzle, is there any differences? The first biggest difference would be is now Natsuki has probably gone up a little bit in my regards. The first scene that you get with her, you know, it sets up her character of like, oh, she's got this like, you know, thorny exterior and this, you know, thorny, prickly stuff that, you know, she uses as a defense mechanism for her anxieties and her insecurities. And then like, okay, we saw that, but then her second scene, you know, it sets it up so it's like, oh, here's this, you know, it's like, oh, you're holding the chair for her, and you're like, oh, I'm trying not to look up her skirt, and she's like, ah, you're looking up my skirt, you're such a pervert, and then, but then everything, you know, falls down, and, you know, the books scatter everywhere, her one manga gets creased, and she just starts sobbing, and, you know, she's like, I'm not mad at you, I'm just taking it out on you because I had a really bad day, or I'm having a really bad day. Presumably because her dad was being extra abusive, but, you know, it could be other people at school, whatever. At this point, I wouldn't say that my standings have changed because I felt bad for her. Like, I felt sorry for her, but it's sort of in the same way that, like, you see a puppy with its leg, like, caught in a fence. Like, you want to help. But at the same time, it's just more of a, like, oh, poor you sort of situation. Now, her weekend scene, on the other hand, that did change stuff a bit. Because, you know, then, you know, they say it in game. It's like, okay, she's less, you know, she's less defensive. She's more relaxed. And then, you know, yeah, she's still being, like, playfully bossy. But, you know, you get into your, like, your playful fight and end up with her, like, sort of pinned against the wall. And you lick the frosting off her finger. And, which, you know, again, like, the first time through, we thought that Yuri was bringing that energy to the table. And, it turns out it's the protagonist who's bringing that energy to the table. Which, yeah, no judgment. And whatever floats your boat, protagonist, you know, whatever okies your Doki. And so it's like, okay, though, like, I get it. But in a way, it sort of just reaffirmed that I was correct in my initial choice of Sayori. Well, how does that work? How does Natsuki scene do that? Because I was thinking about it, it's like, well, Natsuki's scene there, like, you get this, like, playful fight, and then, like, the flirtiness of the licking up the frosting. I'm like, okay, that's sort of like Sayori, except that you're missing, like, the familiarity. And then I'm like, well, that's kind of mirrored in Yuri, too. Speaking of which, like, hello, Yuri, how are you doing up there? Like, Yuri has the familiarity where when you're both holding the book together and you're flipping the page and then she takes it. And you also have the flirtiness where you're feeding her the chocolates. But she doesn't really have the playfulness. And so it's like Sayori has, you know, all three of familiarity and playfulness and flirtiness. Yuri has two of the three, familial and flirty. Natsuki has two of the three, playful and flirty, but only Sayori has all three of those things. So I'm like, you know, yeah, so far nothing's changed. Okay, but what if we add Monika into the mix? And it's hard to do that. And again, this is sort of like analyzing them all on the same kind of level, because like, yeah, so if you look at it from like, well, who's your favorite girl between the one who's a girl and the other three who are just dress-up dolls? Like, between option 1 and option 1, what do I think? Like, that's like a boring analysis, so ignore that for now. Let's just treat them all kind of on the same level. The problem is, it's hard to treat Monika on the same level because she doesn't interact with you on the same level, the same way. Like, she doesn't have any moments where she interacts with the protagonist. She interacts with you once when, like, you delete her file and she responds to that. But there's no point where you get to see an interaction between protagonist you and Monika, and so it's hard to judge. But all right, what she got going for her? Well, she is, interestingly, the most selfish, but also the most selfless person of the entire game. I truly believe that she is remorseful for what she's done, which is a good, you know, trait, a good sign, whatever you want to call it. It's like the fact that she has the wake-up moment when you delete her, and she's like, oh, I hate you, you're the most horrible person in existence, but no, I still love you, and wow, I did some really fucked up stuff. And, like, yes, there's other people, like, apologize, like, you know, between Yuri and Natsuki especially, like, where they'll, like, apologize, like, oh, I'm sorry for what I said, I'm sorry for how I acted, and then, like, in Act 4, when things are supposedly better, you know, and like, you know, Yuri's saying, like, oh, I'm sorry for judging you for liking manga, like, it's not my cup of tea, but, you know, I'm sorry that I judged you for it, and I'll try reading one, and, you know, like, oh, Natsuki will try doing a novel, and like, yeah, that's good, like, you know, that's a healthy way of, you know, acting and being. But it's not the same, like, I'm sorry that I judged you for your tastes because they're not my tastes, and I have completely reimagined my life and realized I was a super shitty person before, and I'm gonna change my entire way of being and thinking. They're not on the same level. So she's got that going for her. And going along with that, she's the only one who actually does something for you. Sayori, it's all about, like, how can you help Sayori? Natsuki, it's all about how can you help Natsuki? How can you help Yuri? Monika's the only one who's like, how can I help you instead of you helping me? When she's like, I'm gonna remake the game that you wanted to play. And then in the end, when she torches the whole thing, and she's like, I'm gonna protect you. And I think to a lesser extent, Sayori, which I will defend to this day, that she was trying to help protect her friends. Which I know, it doesn't say it in the end explicitly. Like, I believe the text goes, you know, it's like, no, I won't let you hurt him, or you won't hurt him, something like that. Like, I was wrong, I thought there was happiness to be found here, but there isn't. Goodbye, Silver, goodbye, Sayori, goodbye, Literature Club, and then, boom, everything up in flames. But I still think she was also trying to protect Sayori from, you know, not having to live the hell she did, because of what she does at the end of Act 3, when she's like, when I said I deleted them, or I exaggerated, because I couldn't delete them, they're still my friends. And so it's interesting that even when she was in her most selfish, like, I'm gonna do horrible things to people to get my way. And it's like, oh, they're not real people anyways. What's it matter? Even in the most selfish, she was still like, I can't annihilate my friends. I can't do it. And so combine that with her change of heart when she's truly remorseful. I do think that she was not just trying to protect you in the end, but also Sayori and all her friends. It's like, that's a good sign. Like, someone who is willing to change their belief system to be a better person, someone who's willing to self-sacrifice. But does that make her best girl? Does that make her my favorite? I can't tell. I say she has the potential to be, but with what we're given in game, I'm gonna still have to go with Sayori. Just because there's just not enough information to make the call. Like, you know, it's interesting because, like, at the beginning of the game, there's not enough information because she's not presented as a full character and she's just there to prop up the other ones. And then at the end of the game, there's not enough information because she's so wildly different from the other characters. It's just, you have to compare them together, but you can't. So I guess I'll leave it with that Monica has the potential to be, but with what we're given in game, I still have to go with Sayori. Like, okay, great. I'm glad you've talked about all this. What was the other thing you were talking about? Well, it's like, okay, so Sayori's favorite girl, right? It's like, who would you want to go on a date with? Like, who would you want to be in a relationship with? Sayori, right? No. Shock? What? Of all the potential relationships, it's interesting because, how do I phrase it? There's only one, I think, that could potentially be an okay, healthy relationship. I got spoiler alert. It's potentially Yuri. And you're like, okay, give me the logic. Hit me with that analysis, man. Let's go with. Well, okay, before I hit you with the analysis, let's go over the meta stuff. It's like, well, if there's a Magitech wand and we swing it and like beep boop, they're all real people now. Who would you be in a relationship? Well, the answer is no one because I'm already married. Like, well, okay, that's a boring analysis. All right, so that aside. Beep boop. Who would you be in a relationship with? No one. Like, what? Stop that. I'm 38. They are 18. No, that's gross. Ew. No. But again, that makes for a bad analysis. You're like, okay, well, which option between 0 and 0? Analyze these options. Nothing. That makes for a boring video and we'd be done. So, okay, well, put me in the position of high school protagonist. Sort of. We'll get to that, but... Alright, so everyone's high school age. With all that said, now, give me that analysis. Give me that juicy analysis. Alright. Start with Natsuki. A, because hello. Hi, Natsuki. And because she's probably the easiest one to explain. Like, why would you not want to be in a relationship with Natsuki? Well, it's not you, it's me. Or more specifically, it's your dad. People who know me in real life, I'm trying to, how to phrase this delicately. I don't know when to shut the fuck up. And meanwhile, I can imagine, a Muppet Statler and Waldorf being like, yeah, you're still on this video. Right, but so here's the thing, I've had, when someone is in a position of power and they are being unfair, they're being unjust, they're being cruel and mean, I tend to say something. And yes, that in and of itself is a good trait. Like, you want to speak up. You want to speak truth to power to stop injustices. Sure, overall, that's a good thing. And I've had experiences where, with teachers back when I was in school and essentially confronting them being like, I mean, as more diplomatic than this, but essentially being like, what the hell? This isn't fair. I've, yelled at my bosses. The problem comes in, it's not just me speaking up against my situations. I kind of speak up for other people's situations too. Like, if I see someone else's boss being mean to them, I'll be like, hey, what the hell are you doing? This isn't right. And again, in theory, that's a good trait to have. In Natsuki's case, that's gonna get the shit beaten out of her. Like, I'm gonna make things so much worse. Because it's not that, like, I don't know when to shut up. It's I don't have the ability to shut up. And the problem with Natsuki is, like, she is stuck in this abusive situation. Now, it'd be different. It would depend, like, if this was set, like, in a college thing where she could have her own dorm or she could get her, to an apartment. Then it's, it's fine if I'm like, oh, hey, you want to, like, abuse your daughter? Well, why don't, you shove a cactus in your eye because you're being such a prick. If you say that and she's away from, or like if it was different, like if she moved in with Yuri or Sayori or Monica. But as the situation stands, it would be a bad idea to try and date Natsuki because I would know not to say something bad, but I don't know that I could guarantee it, and that would make things way worse for her being in the abusive situation she's in. And so just like for her own safety, like, could I do it? Maybe, but I can't guarantee it. And like, that's not a gamble I'd want to take. Like, I don't want to gamble dating someone that might get the ever-loving crap beat out of them by their abusive parent. So like, it would depend. Like, yes, if she had a different spot to be and she was out of the situation, then it would be fine. Because, the rest of the stuff is fine. Like, okay, so she's got, like, her thorny defensive exterior, and, like, maybe it's not, my favorite cup of tea. But I think some of that is, like, a defense mechanism. And, like, if, you show her, like, she can be herself, she doesn't have to be defensive, a lot of that would fall away. But, so, it's not you, it's not me, it's your dad. Like, sure, I'll hit him in the knees with a baseball bat if he tries to come in at you, but, like, as is, if you're living at home with him, that's gonna be a problem. Okay, let's move on to a similar situation of my own failings. Sayori, you said Sayori was best girl, so therefore, she'd be the one to date, right? And again, it depends, but no. With what we're given. The problem is Sayori's severe depression. Now, it's not a problem that someone has depression. Like, as I said, I have an anxiety disorder, so I'm not like, oh, you can't date people with mental issues, right? Like, I mean, so first of all, she needs, professional help. She needs a therapist, she needs meds, she needs professional help. Her depression is that bad. But let's say, she gets some help. How much? Because... here, I can phrase it like poetically, and you can see the issue as it arises. Like, okay, the rain clouds, she wakes up one day and the rain clouds, they're pretty heavy, they're pretty thick, and they're pouring rain. Like, well, I will be there for you. I will sit next to you and hold the umbrella for you until the rain clouds go away. You're like, oh, that's so romantic and poetic and cute. Okay. It's not quite as romantic and poetic and cute, but remember how I said I have an anxiety disorder? Well, the same is true for someone in a relationship. Like, she could say, well, while the creatures of the dark are spitting around you, snarling and snapping at you, I will sit by you and keep the flashlight on to keep them at bay until they leave. Like, oh, how cute, how romantic. Yeah, what happens if my anxiety and her depression flare up at the same time? And that's why it depends on how much treatment she's got, because, yes, you have to support someone with it, but, like, I would not be capable of providing the support she needs, theoretically, and she would not be capable of theoretically providing the support that I need if things misaligned. I don't know how to say, like, I'm not saying, like, don't date people with mental issues, but, like, it's just, I'm worried that, like, if she had a severe depressive episode at the same time I had an anxiety attack, that's gonna be bad, and it's gonna exacerbate the situation, because, of course, she's gonna feel bad because she wouldn't be able to, like, help me, and so that's gonna make her depression worse. I'm gonna worry that she's gonna spiral out, so that's gonna make my anxiety worse. So again, like, could a relationship work? Sure. But only if she got a lot of help to get stuff under control. Like, yes, if her depression was under control the way my anxiety disorder is, it'd be fine, but as is, it isn't. Okay, now we get to things that are a little more complicated. Like Monica, how about Monica? Monica's not a case of you know, it's a failing on my part. Monica's is, it would be too imbalanced a relationship. Because, like, as is, she's, of course, obsessed with you. Because you're the only person in her entire world. But that's kind of unfair. Like, that's not a good way to start a healthy relationship. Like, that's very one-sided. And so, like, to have a healthy, meaningful relationship, you know, she would need to, like, it's like you have to create like a bio android so that you could upload her consciousness to it so she could go out and see the world. She could meet other people, see other things, listen to other music, whatever. Because as is, it would be unfair to both of us. It'd be unfair to Monica because, of course, she's never met anyone else. And so she's like, I'm so in love with you. It's like, well, are you? Or are you just in love with the fact that there's someone else in your entire universe? Like, if you go out and meet other people, you might find that you like someone else more. And, of course, it'd be unfair to me. Because you don't want, like, I mean, I can't speak for you, viewer, but I know at least I wouldn't want someone to only be like, I want to date you because I don't know any better, and you're the only person that I know. Like, unless you're super desperate, I would think, you know, just like me, you'd want someone to, like, date you and be in a relationship for who you are. Like, they like you as a person, they agree with your philosophies, you know, they share the same hobbies, that sort of stuff. So it's unfair to her because she doesn't know any better. It's unfair to you because she doesn't know any better. So could it work out in the end? Sure. You know, you upload her, she goes off, it enjoys the world, and then, you know, in a couple of years comes back, and she could be like, you know, like, I've seen the world, I've seen other tastes, I've seen other ways of being, but, you know, and after all this time, I still think about you, you know, then sure. But it could also be like, I've seen all the world and stuff, and like, I will forever be grateful for what you did for me, you know, but I don't want to, like, be in a relationship with you. Like, she needs to learn that for herself, to know what she actually wants, rather than you being the one and only option she has. Because, you know, there's stuff like, even within, like, her own dialogue, like, think about, like, you know, she talked about how she's a vegetarian. But, you know, she doesn't do it for philosophical reasons, but just because she doesn't want to, like, take more out of the world. And, of course, that could change once she becomes a full-fledged, like, person, whatever. And, you know, she's like, well, it'd be, you know, very romantic if, you know, we could have a meal together that was a vegetarian meal. Like, that's fair. But, like, at the same time, like, maybe after going out into the real world, she's like, you know, maybe I want someone who also shares the same belief. But maybe she doesn't. Maybe after going in the world, she's like, no, I'm okay with just, like, you don't have to be a vegetarian, but maybe we could share a meal like that just as a gesture. And so, you know, it's, again, it's just, she's too naive. For being the smartest, most aware one of all, she is the most naive one. And so she needs to learn more. That finally brings us to Yuri. And the reason why I say potentially Yuri would be the only one to have a relationship with is, again, like all the other girls, it very much, it depends. The difference is it depends something within the game, not on something beyond the scope of the game. Because, like, Natsuki, it depends if she gets away from her father. Sayori, it depends if she gets treatment for her depression. Monica, it depends if she goes out and sees the rest of the world. But all of that would be like, I mean, not that it would make sense, but, you know, like, if there was a Doki Doki Literature Club 2, like, after the fact, where everyone's just living their life, again, that wouldn't make sense with what the game was, but, like, you get it. Stuff that would be addressed in that game is what it depends on. Yuri, on the other hand, it depends on a detail of the game that's never made explicit. So let's talk about Yuri. Yuri's whole thing is the problem is it's hard to tell what is true in Act 1, or Act 4 for that matter. And that's where the problem is, because Act 2, of course, is when Monica's like ramping them up to 11 and stuff gets crazy. Like, I don't understand. Yuri cuts, right? We know that. She cuts in Act 1. Both with her poem and, which we'll get to in a second, because it's sort of a key issue of the puzzle, or the problem, whatever. But also, like, you know, when you have your scene with her and when you go out to get a towel and you come back and she's rolling her sleeve back up after the whole incident with the knife and the blood and all that stuff, presumably she made a little whoop on her arm then. Now, of course, this isn't like Act 2 where she's just like, you know, like eviscerating her arm. You know, it's not out of control, off the rails, but it's still a thing she does. Now, that is not the issue. Like, I know plenty of people in real life who have scars on their arms. Or elsewhere, I don't know. Like, I know they have scars on their arm. There might be scars elsewhere too, but, you know, they don't do that anymore. And I firmly believe it would be possible to help Yuri find a better outlet than cutting. So that's not the problem. The problem is when it gets to her poem. You know, as she says, her knife is the symptom. Her soft bread, her skin, is the curiosity. The raccoon is the urge. And it gets into what is the urge exactly. Now, it's hard to tell because the only time you hear about it, Monica says in Act 2, when things are already like way like dialed up to 11, she's like, oh, I should tell you, you know, Yuri cuts, but not because of depression, but like she gets some sort of high from it. It might be sexual, like, and of course she's just trying to scare you away from being with Yuri because she's trying to, you know, get you for herself. But she's not lying. Like, Monica never changes people. She amplified what they already had, but she didn't put new stuff there. And so the issue is how much of that is new versus how much of it is amplified. And like, I still don't get it. Fine. You know, like Salt and Peppa, let's talk about sex, baby. And you're like, what? Is Yuri a hemophiliac? That's the issue. There it is in the open. Does Yuri get off to blood? It's hard to tell. And I mean, Act 2, clearly yes. But it's hard, you know, she specifically says, she's like, I'm gonna touch myself reading your poem and give myself paper cuts to get your skin oil into my blood. And she's like, here, I gave this poem to you, it's marked with my scent. And like, yeah, there's yellow on it, so like, she probably peed on it a little and maybe some other stuff too, but it's also just covered in blood. So clearly Act 2 Yuri is into blood. Is Act 1 Yuri, or Act 4, you know, into blood the same way? It's hard to tell. Because her poem, you know, as she said, you know, in her poem with the raccoon, the urge, she was cutting, or she had the knife at least, before the raccoon showed up. The raccoon showed up after she started cutting. So it was like, which if you want to sort of like break it down, it's like, okay, she cut herself out of curiosity, and then she's like, I like this. Or, you know, she feels a need to do it, whether or not she likes it. But and at the end of the poem, here's where it gets a little questionable, is, you know, she talks about how she always, like, the raccoon is always there, it follows her around, so she always keeps her knife on hand and her supply of bread. And the very last line, I believe, is, I feel myself. Now, if it was any of the other people writing that poem, you'd be like, yeah, that's metaphorical. Like I feel like I understand myself. With Yuri, though, is that metaphorical or is that literal? Because Yuri is the only one who is overtly sexual in the game. Now, like, yes, Monica says stuff in her monologue in Act 3 about, like, she talks about sex slaves, and she talks, like, when she's pondering the existence of God, and she says, you know, like, only draw PG artwork of because we're not that far into our relationship, and she has her little thing about, like, a kiss? Are you sure with me? I'm just fucking with you. So, like, and he's like, oh, but I do get kind of romantic. But, like, Monica's stuff still sort of keeps it PG-ish. You know, Natsuki doesn't really say anything about it besides, like, were you looking at my skirt? And that's more of an embarrassed thing anyways. Sayori, I don't think has anything. Yuri, granted, she's off her rocker because Monica's screwed around with her marbles, but, you know, she overtly says twice. You know, the one is like, I'm gonna take this poem and touch myself, and, like, I took out my frustration on your pen, which then she later says how, like, she took the pen and touched herself with the pen. So, like, Yuri is the only character who is overtly sexual, and so her line of, like, I feel myself, it's hard to tell. And that's the issue, because if she is a hemophiliac, no. That's a hard line for me, no. And that it'd be, you know, an unfair relationship for her because she's not getting what she wants. It'd be an unfair relationship for me because she'd want something I'm, you know, like, that I'm not comfortable doing. And so it depends. If she's not into blood, and that's more of an Act 2 thing that's being dialed up, then it would work. That would be a healthy relationship, I think, otherwise. As I said, like, I think that the cutting is not so much of an issue in Act 1 and 4 that you couldn't help her find other ways to deal with it. But, you know, it's not fair to someone if, yeah, and it's true in real life, and I'm not going to get into, like, I'm talking about hemophilia now, but I just want to make clear, if you're watching this, if you're into blood play with your partner or partners or whatever, like, I'm not judging you, but, like, you know, don't invite me, and you're like, I wasn't planning to. If you and your partner or partners are all consenting, great. You know, you have to be on the same wavelength in some degree. Like, you can be like, okay, I'm vanilla, my partner's vanilla, that's a perfect fit. Or you're like, I like XYZ kink, my partner likes XYZ kink, perfect fit. Or maybe you're like, I like 1, 2, 3, my partner likes ABC. There's some similarities, and so we can, like, meet halfway, so we each get a little something out of it. That works fine. Or maybe, like, my partner likes XYZ, and I don't get anything from it, but I don't mind it. So, like, sure, I'll, like, do whatever it is with them. It's not going to do anything for me, but I'm, you know, fine doing that for them. That also works. But if you have a hard boundary where you're like, no, I'm not into this, you know, that doesn't work for a relationship. Like, you know, if you have something that you don't want to do and they do want, like, it's just unfair for the relationship. Like, they're not going to get something they want. You know, you are going to be, you know, you're asked to do something you're not comfortable with, and of course you'll be like, no, I'm not going to do that. So it just doesn't work. So yeah, that's how that breaks down. It depends. If she's a hemophiliac, no, it's not going to work. Sorry. You've got to find someone else. If she isn't, and it's just the cutting, potentially that would work. And that's why, even though Sayori might be, like, who's your favorite Sayori, but in terms of what would a healthy relationship with any of them be, the only one is possibly Yuri, depending. So yeah, I don't think there's anything more that needs. I've pontificated long enough. Like, I went over, you know, who do you think's your favorite girl? I guess it's Sayori, potentially Monica. Monica has the potential to be, but we don't know enough, so I have to go with Sayori. Now, who would you, like, have an actual relationship with? The only one that could potentially be a healthy relationship is Yuri. But I filled up enough time. I've made an episode. Now you have a variety thing to watch. I don't know. I don't got anything else to say. See you tomorrow for DBD. See you next week for, when I finally start the new game. And yeah. You know, hopefully this, you know, either entertained you while you were doing dishes at the least, but, you know, maybe let you think about something. Think about your own life. Think about your own relationships, and just, you know, making the world a better place, and I don't know, all that jazz. See you next time.